Hi, I'm Ron Lawson from Dirtbike. I'm just outside of State College, Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful autumn day, the weather's perfect, and I've got a brand new motorcycle to ride. This is the new Transalp 750 Honda. It's kind of a new bike with an old name, and this is going to be a lot of fun. So this is the bike they've assigned to me for the week. It's not quite stock. We have Bridgestone semi-knobs on there, the Battle Axe Adventures. Also have crash bars on the engine. I don't think we call them crash bars now. It's probably called engine guards. The skid plate, not stock. Those are all accessory items that Honda offers through their dealerships. For a $10,000 bike, this is far more customizable than most bikes in this price range. You have the user menus where you can choose your level of 4 different pre-cooked menus. I think we're just going to be taking off in the sport mode. It's just one quick push of the button here on the handlebar and you can switch it back and forth on the fly. I think if you want to customize your whole menu, then it might be a little bit more complicated. They were just running through that. I'm not sure I got it, but by the end of the day, I'm sure I'll figure it out. The bike also has quick shift. Again, amazing number of features on this bike for a machine in this price range. You just don't see that very often. So the Transalp name has been around for a while. Old timers might remember the bike from the 80s, but mostly it's been a Euro-only model. In the US, that bike that they had way back when was kind of ahead of its time. There weren't too many people that really caught on to the whole Paris-Dakar image back then. So they brought it back, and this bike is very much like the original, just brought into the modern age. The cool thing about this bike, again, is the price point. They clearly brought it in right under $10,000, which, you know, in the adventure bike world, routinely talk about $20,000, $30,000 motorcycles, and this thing pretty much has most of the same features as the best bikes out there. What really sets it apart are the electronic modes that it has. When Yamaha came up with the T7, they kind of had to skip out on that. This bike has fully functioning user modes. You can switch between sport, which is, you know, pretty aggressive, and rain, and gravel, and then if you want to go a little bit further, you can go into the user menus. Then you get to adjust separately the power output, as well as traction control, ABS, and engine braking. Now the first thing I did, I took off to try and experiment with gravel mode. I really didn't understand what it was. Gravel mode, in my way of thinking, was what you should put it in. It's like an off-road mode. Now that's not really what Honda was thinking of for gravel mode. This is more like a safety mode for riding in really, really rocky terrains. It's not really an aggressive mode for sport riding in the off-road setting. So traction control's turned way up, and in fact, when you try to go uphill, I've got a little uphill here right now. It's pretty difficult. It kind of feels like the engine's sputtering out some. So then you can go straight into sport mode. So sport mode is, you think it'd be for the street, but it kind of allows you to have a little less traction control. You can get away with a little more. You can spin the motor, and then if you really want to get aggressive, you can drift the bike on in the dirt. But the best setting, I mean, after all is said and done, is to go into the user modes and customize your own setting. That way you can kind of turn up the engine braking, which is the way I like it. That way you're not all dabbing on the rear brake all the time. And then you can also, you can give it full power. Pretty much the power output winds up in the same place at top, you know, when the throttle's all the way open. Now when you adjust the power down, it just makes it so that the more or less, you know, I want to say the throttle cam, even though that's a nonsense term because this doesn't have a throttle cable, but it just turns more slowly. It doesn't give you as much motor output in those initial cracks of the throttle. But again, this bike's not it's not like it's 1,000 cc's. It's very controllable. Power is super smooth, so you can go ahead and turn the power mode all the way up. But then you get into traction control, which, you know, it's still not quite sophisticated enough to allow full aggressive dirt riding with any level of traction control. You can do some casual riding with that turned down to its lower levels, a little bit less intrusion. But at the end of the day, you really want to turn that off. You can actually get the bike stuck a little bit if you're going up a hill with all kinds of rocks and stuff like that. You try to open the throttle a little bit too fast, it just more or less shuts down the motor and you lose all your momentum, and that doesn't really help anything. But having said that, I'm going to spend most of my day riding with those settings. Traction control off, ABS in the rear turned off, but in the front you can't turn it off, which is a good thing. It's actually really effective. A couple times I got into rocks and stuff, grabbed a handful of front brake, and instead of locking it up and putting me on my head, it just slowed me down, made that little knocking sound. As far as power goes, this is a super sweet bike. It's very similar to the Yamaha T7, probably not as much low-end torque as the Suzuki V-Strom 800 DE that we tested recently. But I mean, how much power you really want when you get into the dirt? This thing really moves out well, and more than anything else, when you're in rocks and gnarly stuff, you can kind of hold the throttle at a steady level, and you know, that's kind of its own traction control. The motor doesn't gain revs really quickly when it gets into rocks and starts spinning. It kind of tempers its action a little bit, and so super easy to ride. I mean, crazy easy to ride. As far as the ergos go, this thing has a little bit more street influence than a T7, or maybe even a little bit more than an Africa Twin. So the seat height is pretty low, that's a good thing, but it still feels really comfortable when you stand up. The bar's in the right place, and the foot pegs are good. They have really good off-road foot pegs once you take out the rubber inserts that are in there. So the trail, when it does get really tough, like I'm dealing with kind of some big rocks here, and it is a lot of work. You get into this type of situation, you can't really sit down at all. You got to stay standing, try to keep your momentum up. The great thing about the bike is it's perfectly stable. It really goes in a straight line, even when you're dealing with some pretty gnarly stuff. In this kind of situation, when you're going up a hill like this, traction control really wouldn't be a useful alternative. You would actually stumble quite a bit. It has a little ways to go before it's a viable dirt alternative. This bike is excellent for the price. Can't believe that Honda actually pulled this off. This bike is actually made in Japan. It's not like they outsourced it in Taiwan or Vietnam. I'm sure there's some components made all over the world, but it feels like a high quality bike. The suspension is rather soft. It only has preload adjustment, no damping adjustment, which is probably the first thing that's gonna give it away, let you know that this isn't a super expensive bike. I mean, you can spend $10,000 on suspension alone if you really try in the adventure bike world. Honda decided to leave that section alone. Suspension's good, it's solid, it's stable, it's actually cushy at low speed, and it's absorbing rocks just fine. I think only when you start going faster is when you'll run into any limitations there. There's a lot of movement on the chassis. The bike can be a little bouncy. But overall, I'd say the suspension for stock settings, they did a great job for who the bike is meant for. So one of the reasons Honda brought us all the way out here to Pennsylvania for this was to sample what's called a BDR X route. The Backroads Discovery routes it's a great organization. They have about 13 routes all over the country. Most of them are 1,000 miles long. The X routes are called that because they're excursion routes. The things you can do in one day, generally about half the length or less of the normal BDR routes. This one is called the PA Wilds, coming from Southern California. I don't get to experience, well, trees for one thing, and colors like this. This is late October, and man, what a gorgeous part of the country. Temperature's about right. To tell you the truth, I think I'm going to come back after having experienced just a little bit of what BDR routes have to offer at various functions over the years. I've never gone out and done one on my own and just tried to follow the track logs and do it like you're supposed to do it. It seems like I'm always on a schedule trying to come back, but man, this is just incredible. The fall colors are really coming out here in California. The fall colors are pretty much the same thing as the summer colors, which are basically brown. Anyways, what a great place to experience this bike. So hopefully I'm going to be able to get a hold of a Transalp back in California and then get to learn a little bit more about it. This is a bike that really deserves a lot more in-depth riding, testing, and frankly, any excuse I have to get a hold of this thing back home and play with it over the long term, I'm going to take advantage of. So stay tuned. We might have more on the Transalp coming up, and then while you're at it, check out some of our other adventure bike and dual sport videos. And thanks for watching.